Okay, we are in Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020, recreating in the simulator the exact weather of the Blackhawk airplane crash at Ronald Reagan or Washington National Airport, runway 33. And you can see I'm taking off from there, runway 33, in a helicopter, and the exact same weather conditions. And I'm not going to set the altimeter pressure. It's like a zeroing that you're supposed to do on whether it's an airplane or a helicopter to tell you. So it calibrates the altimeter according to the barometric pressure. And my theory is that they never set that. So they, inside the helicopter, all three pilots or occupants, according to their gauges, they thought they were at 200 feet or less, which probably explains why the airport, maybe that's the data that they were reading also. So when they were approaching and they were told to look for the aircraft, they think they are at 100 to 200 feet in the proper safe range. And they would be not looking left, because if the gauge was misleading to their true altitude because it wasn't set, they would be looking up. If they thought they were, say, at 100 feet, they'd be looking up at an angle. And I figure they actually looked up and they saw an aircraft at a higher altitude behind the aircraft they struck. So they had no reason to look left, because there's no way that an aircraft would be approaching at their altitude that they thought they were at. So here we are. We're going to take off. Let's just... And in the simulator, I can hit the B on the keyboard, which will calibrate the altimeter in the helicopter to the proper barometric pressure reading. So it's either they didn't do that, or the switch or on the helicopter to adjust for the proper barometric altitude wasn't working. So I'm just going to look down. You can see here it is nighttime. I'm going to put up a map just so I can see. I'm going to try to fly out and come back in at what I would perceive to be 150 or 200 feet. So I got to go straight out, left, get back to the side, and see my altimeter. And you can see right there, it actually, I think it's showing negative 200 feet. And I haven't adjusted anything. So let's just take off. So if they didn't set it, so now the gauge shows that they're at 0. So it's about 200 feet off. So they think they're at 200 feet. Okay, let's get back down. So they'd be flying along with their night vision. And I'm going to we'll cross the river and then come back just to show this. So they think they're at 200 feet or under 200 feet. And when the air traffic controller instructed them to get the aircraft in sight, if they would assume that the aircraft would be coming in at 300 to 400 feet. So they would be actually looking upwards. And they never would have So you can see right there, they think they're at 100 feet. They're actually at like 200 feet higher. And that's because, and I didn't set the gate. Now I'm going to push the B key just to show you. Okay, I'll get down to the, see there's a, so let's get down to, say they were thinking they're right there, 200. Now I'm going to actually calibrate it to the barometric pressure and watch. Then it'll show what the actual altitude that I'm at. So I'm going to hit B on the key. See, it just went right up to 350, almost 400. So there was a simple, either a failure of the barometric setting on the altimeter, or they didn't manually do it. I'm not sure in the Blackhawk if they have to manually do it or not. So that's proof. And it's actually when I took off, and this is the exact same weather of that night, and you could see it was actually reading on the altimeter before I left the ground. It was actually 200 feet below or minus 200 feet. So that's the effect.
Washington Tower DDE 11 Delta Delta Echo -11700 feet to land.
DDE 11 Delta Delta.
So that's it. That explains it. It was a simple, either a failure of that instrument to set itself for the proper barometric pressure, or I'm not sure if it's automatic with the Blackhawk or if you manual. I know a lot of aircraft have to manually hit it, but according to that weather, that explains the 200-foot discrepancy. So it would, I mean, it could have still been an error by the pilots, but all the gauges on the headsets of the pilots and the gauges on the for the altimeter would have read 200 feet when really they were 400 feet. And I'm not sure if that data is what is transferred to the airport. So the airport may have actually thought they were 200 feet also, which would explain why they're saying that, you know, the last data reading was 200 feet, which it's completely explained according to the weather that the barometric pressure setting for the altimeter gauge, for whatever reason, whether it was the aircraft and there was a gauge malfunction, and that completely explains why there was a 200-foot discrepancy. So the pilots would have thought they were at 200 feet or below, and they weren't. And when they were being directed to look for the approaching aircraft, if they think they're, say, at 100 feet or 200 feet, they wouldn't be looking left where the aircraft is approaching, because they think they're a lot lower than the glide slope for any approaching aircraft. So they'd be looking up at an angle. And that explains why they didn't actually see the aircraft. They'd be looking up, and I figure they probably saw an aircraft in the distance, which would have been at a higher altitude, approaching from behind the aircraft that they hit. And they may have seen that, and all their eyes would have been angled that way. The gauges would have been reading 200 feet or lower. So, in my opinion, it's not the fault. It's either the fault of them not setting the barometric pressure on the altimeter gauge. You see now when I'm on the ground, it's at 0, but when I took off, it was actually minus 200. Anyways, that's my theory. And like I say, I'm not a pilot. I've got about 30, 40 years experience in flight simulators, and it's a common thing when you fly that you would periodically adjust. You'd hit B on your keyboard, but pilots, real pilots, they would be given a barometric pressure reading from the local airports, would update them, and they would adjust that into their gauge. It's right on their gauge. There's a barometric pressure, because it's the altitude is going by a barometric pressure reading. I'm not sure exactly how it works, the technology, but it is something that does have to be adjusted. That is it. Duke out.